Hello everybody and welcome to the first episode of our series on Touhou Luna Nights, an anime-inspired Metroidvania game that is starting off pretty light on plot. We've kind of just been dropped into this alternate dimension, Luna Nights, and are told to go look for the maid's mistress. And now we're being stopped by this other random character that they apparently know. As you can see in this series, I have absolutely no idea of anything about Touhou. I don't understand how any of this connects to each other, and right now we're just enjoying some very flashy boss fights. It's actually very well animated, and it definitely shows that a team is behind this and it's a team that cares about what it's making, especially when it's for a niche product like Touhou, which is a pretty popular, consistent bullet hell anime series of video games. It's just that I have no experience with this, so the insistence on characters already knowing each other and not telling us what's going on, and wow, that was a really lucky dodge that I did right there, which is particularly amazing, as you can probably see in this combat. This is the first boss fight. I really have no idea what I'm doing, especially when I do not use time stop in this boss fight at all, from what I remember. My current strategy was just to try and find chips, moments where her defense wasn't on, moments when I could get out of having to deal with that perpetual shield that she has, and it just ended up being a lot of chip damage, which is why this boss fight is kind of long, in spite of it being so simplistic, but it had to be so simplistic because I have no idea what I'm doing. Later down the line, I'll definitely learn the absolute importance that time stop has on this game's mechanics. It definitely makes it more strategic than what you're seeing on screen right now, because it's a game that very smartly combines real-time and pseudo turn-based mechanics to make something that's actually pretty refreshing from a Metroidvania standpoint, especially when paired up against bosses like this, with the only real issue being, just reminding me that I am being an idiot and spamming my knives too much, and unfortunately MP in this game is kind of hard to come by. I could probably get it back if I was using the game's grazing system, but again, that's something that I do not understand right now because I don't even think that's a thing. But the thing I was getting to was, this game's boss design issue is mainly that it's pretty repetitive. Some of the later boss fights, because they have intricate attacks, they follow a very set pattern, so there isn't like an AI involved. To be honest, this is probably closer to Mega Man boss design than anything else. At least with that attack, you get a lot of graze back, and which is really good, considering that this is the last part of the boss fight. Which I'm not gonna knock the game for having repetitive combat design in its boss fights. It's not that it's repetitive, it's just that it repeats very strictly, which is, it's kind of disappointing, but it definitely helps people get a grasp on what they're supposed to be doing. It's not as dynamic as Dark Souls is going to be, but I guess in a Metroidvania context it could work. It's just kind of disappointing, like I say, because in those boss fights, when you get down to the point where you're learning all the attacks, you start learning that the attacks are all the same. It doesn't change. So, while that's helpful, it just doesn't really make those bosses interesting, but they are definitely challenges, which is why I'm guessing they went with patterned attack repertoires rather than something like this, which feels, even though she's only throwing out like 3 attacks back to back, they're orchestrated in different ways, so even though it's repeating stuff, it definitely still feels dynamic and interesting. Whereas those boss fights feel like we're just going through their act and just have to work within it, is the issue. Knife throwing, having only ranged attack available, is actually a pretty interesting spin on the concept. I'm sure there have been Metroidvanias before that have used guns instead of swords, but tying it to an MP system like it's a magic spell, but it doesn't take a lot of MP. It's definitely a game that's going for a more strategic sort of design philosophy, which I appreciate because it gives its own unique spin on the genre. Doesn't make the game feel repetitive, doesn't make it fall back into the competition. And it's all just pretty solid stuff from the first section onward. I mean, that boss fight compared to some of these other competing Metroidvanias is definitely above and beyond what an amateur can do. So, like I said, it's a pretty good first start for Touhou, and I hope that we can see more as the series progresses.